Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you all for joining today's conference. All participant lines have been placed in listen-only mode until the question and answer session. To ask a question, press star 1 on your telephone keypad. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, please disconnect at this time. And now I'll turn today's conference over to Ivy Allen. Thank you. You may begin.
Howdy, folks. I'm glad you all were able to join us today. We're excited to present our second webinar for the Southern Rockies LCC. I work in communications with them. We do have John Rice on the line, our science coordinator, Kevin Johnson, our LCC coordinator, and Betsy Mealy, which is going to be presenting today. I just was going to tell you a little bit about Betsy this morning. She is a senior conservation planner. She leads regional and statewide conservation assessments and initiatives for the Nature Conservancy Colorado chapter. She coordinates the Gunnison Climate Working Group, which is a group of public and private partners seeking to increase understanding and awareness of the threats posed by climate change to the species, ecosystems, and people. They also identify and prioritize strategies and techniques to help people and nature cope with climate change. In addition, they promote coordinated and effective implementation of strategies that are identified to fight climate change. She works with the Southwest Climate Change Initiative to provide information and tools to conservation practitioners and natural resource managers on climate adaptation in vulnerability landscapes across the Four Corners states. Betsy is presenting today on a project, building resilience to climate change in the Gunnison Basin, which the Southern Rockies LCC helped to fund. And I'm going to turn it over to Betsy and let her get started.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin and Ivy, for the opportunity to speak with you today. And we particularly appreciate the Southern Rockies LCC for providing our first outside grant to help kick the project off, and it was really critical to helping us build our climate adaptation program, and that funding largely went to the vulnerability assessment that has helped provide important match to our on-the-ground climate adaptation project. And I've been working on this project for about 4 years now, and it really has been an exciting project, and it's been a terrific group of people to work with in the Gunnison Basin. And just to step back a minute, I wanted to point out that reducing the impacts of climate change is one of the Nature Conservancy's 4 priority global challenges, along with water and oceans and forests. But in Colorado, we're focused on climate adaptation, and the Gunnison Basin is in our pilot project to help reduce the risk of climate change on both nature and people. What I'd like to do today is just give you an overview of how the Gunnison Climate Working Group was formed, a little bit of the history and the background, and now what we've been doing for these past three and a half years to prepare for change, and then what have we learned, and then where are we going from here in terms of next steps. There's some exciting things going on. I don't think I have to spend too much time on this to this group, but I think we all know that the increases in temperature are driving major ecosystem changes across the Southwest and across the world, and it's threatening livelihoods, and in particular in the Gunnison Basin, water supply and forage, hay production, recreation industry, for example, the skiing and fishing and all kinds of recreation. And really, what is happening is what we've been experiencing in terms of, say, earlier snow melt, increased dust events, tree mortality, and the drought, the wildfires, not so much in the Gunnison Basin, but in the general region, is putting the people and plants, animals, and our habitats at risk. And the climate scientists tell us is going to continue. And so we have to deal with this one way or another. And so the Southwest Climate Change Initiative was formed in 2009 by the Nature Conservancy, working with Wildlife Conservation Society and a number of other partners, Western Water Assessment, CLIMAS with Greg Garfin down in Arizona, really to help prepare natural resource managers and conservation practitioners for climate change, to reduce the effects on nature and people. I got involved in 2009, about this time of year, to start planning for Colorado's climate adaptation workshop. We chose to work in the Gunnison Basin for a number of reasons, but it's about a 2.5 million acre area, and as you can see from the map, it's largely Forest Service land, and then next BLM land, but National Park Service, as well as state parks and wildlife lands and private lands. So there's a real variety of land ownership, and as we all know, climate change doesn't care about land ownership, so we need to be looking across all boundaries. And we decided to focus on 3 conservation targets at that meeting, and based on the interviews with the local natural resource managers. The Gunnison Sagegrouse, one of the rarest species in all of North America, alpine wetlands, and headwaters, rivers and streams. We had a great turnout, and we followed the methodology of Molly Cross et al., their 2012 paper, their ACT framework, and it was really a great framework to kick off the climate adaptation project. It was a whirlwind meeting, but basically we went through 4 key steps. We selected the features, we developed management objectives, and then we went through this process of assessing what the effects of climate change would be on our conservation targets, and then identified preliminary management strategic actions, and then did a very final step of prioritizing actions. And our group has continued on and to step 5 and 6. But an example of one of the outcomes of the meeting, and we were lucky because we had the advantage of the Gunnison Sagegrouse Strategic Committee and previous work of many of the agencies in the Gunnison Basin that had been working on research and management to ensure the long-term viability of the sage-grouse in the basin. So we were building on their work, but one of the bottlenecks in the sage-grouse life cycle is their brood rearing, and there's a lot of concern that was brought up at the meeting and throughout the process that we worked through, that with further drought and increased temperature changes, we would see fewer and fewer high-quality brood rearing habitats, and then that would impact chick survival. And one of the key strategies to address that was identified by that group was to try to figure out how to keep the water in these brood rearing habitats, to restore these areas and to reduce erosion and try to raise the water table. So it's really all about the water. And we didn't know what was going to happen exactly after the workshop, but several of our key partners wanted to continue the dialogue to see how we could work together to reduce the adverse effects of climate change in the basin. And it was, at that time, it was largely the BLM, the Parks and Wildlife, and NRCS, as well as Forest Service, and the county wanted to, that was the core group that worked together and said, look, let's meet again and let's figure out what we can do to work together. So we developed a team charter with the help of Patrick McCarthy of the Southwest Climate Change Initiative and a work plan, and we've continued to meet once or twice a year and it's just been a fantastic group of people to work with. And it's a very open group. We've just recently added Trout Unlimited, but others are welcome. We just revised our goals at our 2012 December meeting. They're basically, as Ivy said earlier, basically what we're trying to do is better understand what the effects of climate change are on the ecosystems and species and the people that live in the Gunnison Basin, and figure out what we can do to reduce those threats. And then finally, we want to work together, promote collaboration and coordination across land ownership to take action. And I think we've been very focused on that, and that's part of why I believe we're effective. One of the first things that we did in our work plan was we said we needed to better understand across the basin what species and ecosystems are at risk, and how at risk are they, and what makes them at risk. And so this would help us set priorities for strategy development. And we really appreciate the funding from the Southern Rockies for that. That enabled us to complete that project. And it's an ongoing assessment. You're never really done, but it was a work in progress. It was the first attempt to understanding how vulnerable our ecosystems and species are. We followed the methods from Massachusetts for ecosystems, the Fish and Game and the Manomet Center. And then for species, we followed the Nature Climate Change Vulnerability Index, which was really good. And it was largely a literature search, and we had a number of workshops, and then we interviewed key experts in the field. For example, Jim Worrall, who is a forest researcher, provided a lot of key information about spatial distribution projections of our forest types. Here's an example of the kind of outcome of the vulnerability assessment. Basically, we looked at the 24 ecosystems with respect to about 9 or 10 key factors: how restricted the ecosystem was, whether we thought they would be subjected to increased pest attacks, and on you can see across the top. And we rated those factors for each ecosystem. And over half of our ecosystems were ranked either high or moderately highly vulnerable to climate change. There was not always agreement, and that's to be expected, and it's an evolving process. But as you can see, some of these were low at the time, and now with new information, their rank will probably change over time. But I think the bottom line is really what are the key factors that are affecting the vulnerability. And this list of factors, I think, is what our group feels should be considered when we develop basin-wide ecosystem strategies. In terms of species, we looked at 73 species of concern. Most of these, many of them are tracked by the Colorado Natural Heritage Program, who did a terrific job of running these species through the index, along with Chris Pegg here at our office, but with input from many of our Gunnison Climate Working Group members who are expert in these fields, in some of these species. And I think it's probably not too surprising, but that our most vulnerable species groups are plants. Many of them were extremely vulnerable, highly vulnerable, and amphibians, fish, and insects. And we felt that perhaps the reason why, not the only, not to simplify it, but many of these have limits or barriers to their distribution for dispersal, and that was probably one reason that they were highly vulnerable. Another way to think about these species, because there's so many of them, it's hard to get a handle on it, but where do they occur? Most of them occurred in the freshwater habitats, the streams and rivers and wet meadows and the alpine areas, spruce, fir, and sagebrush. Interestingly, sagebrush itself didn't come out highly vulnerable, but many of the species in it did. Another aspect of our vulnerability assessment was completed by Cory Nap, a really bright young student from University of Alaska, Fairbanks, who really, through her work looking at the social impacts of climate change on two livelihoods, what she did is really help provide the context for our ecological vulnerability assessment. And she really opened our eyes, and I don't have time to get into all the details, but she interviewed about 35 individuals in the ranching community and the recreation industry in the Gunnison Basin to help look for trends of what the impacts were, or what those people felt they would be impacted by climate change or weather impacts. And as you can see here in her summary table, that the ranchers are particularly, over 90% of the ranchers are mostly concerned about drought. Not as much by the recreation industry, but they're also very concerned about inadequate snowmelt or snowpack and extreme cold, which is unique to the Gunnison Basin. And I think this quote says it all. From one of the ranchers that, and we saw this in 2012. The drought has eased up a bit this year with this wonderful monsoon that we're getting. Well, let's go back to the Gunnison Sagegrouse, which was highlighted in our 2009 workshop as being a species of concern, and its brood rearing habitat was considered to be a bottleneck in its life cycle. And in our vulnerability assessment, it was ranked highly vulnerable. And as I mentioned, one of the biggest concerns is that with further drought and erosion and shifting habitats, then we're going to see fewer and fewer high-quality brood rearing habitats. And there was a lot of concern by the local experts with Parks and Wildlife and Forest Service and BLM that there's going to be diminished chick survival. And as you can see over in the far right, that's a lot of what we have in these areas, in these wet meadows. And so the group felt that this was really, we needed a no-regret strategy to address this issue. And in 2011, we had the opportunity to apply for the Wildlife Conservation Society's Climate Adaptation Fund, which was a terrific opportunity. And even though we hadn't done our basin-wide strategies, we felt, gosh, for across all of the vulnerable species and ecosystems, we felt that this was a no-regrets strategy that needed action now. And we put in this proposal, and we were fortunately funded to build resilience of this brood-rearing habitat, these wet meadows and small gullies and riparian areas, to help the sage-grouse, but as well as other wildlife species adapt to drought and other aspects of a changing climate. And so we spent quite a bit of time. We wanted to prioritize the sites and design restoration and resilience building treatments. We set a very ambitious goal of restoring 500 to 800 acres of wet meadow habitat, and that's probably more realistic to be a long-term goal, and to establish a monitoring program and really to share our methods and our findings with people across the basin, across the state and the West, people that are working to conserve sagebrush habitats and Gunnison sage-grouse, as well as other species. we enlisted the help of Bill Zedike, who is a real restoration expert extraordinaire from New Mexico. He's done over 250 restoration projects across New Mexico and Arizona, and several of our team members had been down to his trainings, and we've had some connections with Bill Zedike, but his methods hadn't been applied widely in Colorado. So we enlisted Bill's help to design the treatments for these brood rearing habitats, and he brought a number of great ideas to our project team using these simple structures. Mostly what we're using are one-rock dams, but we have some other structures that we're experimenting with to reduce the erosion and head cuts like this where he's standing out in front of, and to raise the water table, improve base flows, and really get the vegetation, the riparian and wetland vegetation growing in these areas to hold the water and catch sediments. And so for the past year now, we've had 2 field seasons. We're in the middle of our second one, but we've completed, gosh, how many? Well, we completed over 100 rock structures in late 2012, and we had about 9 work days. This year we've had 8 work days, and we've enlisted the help of the Nature Conservancy's fire use module, the Southern Rockies fire module up there in the maroon shirts, as well as the Western Colorado Conservation Corps, an outstanding group of young men who've helped us for 2 weeks now to not only stage rock, to build rock, such as you can see in that lower left, the blue shirt with the folks in the blue shirt. And we've enlisted volunteers, and last year we worked mainly on private lands, thanks to the wonderful cooperation of our 2 private landowners. And then this year we're expanding on Forest Service lands on West Flat Top, working with Matt Vasquez and others, and Andrew Breitbart with the BLM down in Wolf Creek on BLM land. So we're excited about that, and we're experimenting with some other methods, drift fences on another private ranch. We think monitoring is really an important aspect to this whole project, and we're experimenting with new methods. We want to see how they're working, and Renee Rondeau of the Colorado Natural Heritage Program, who is just a terrific ecologist with lots of experience in this area, working with Gay Austin of the Bureau of Land Management, a riparian expert down in Gunnison, and with the Forest Service ecologist, has been establishing transects and reading those transects to see if we're making an impact, or what the response is in these wet meadows and eroded areas, primarily focused on vegetation. But we've also got some work being done by Bill Zedike and Steve Froman out of New Mexico, where they're looking at sediment deposition. So they're leading the effort on the geomorphological monitoring, doing longitudinal profiles as well as cross-sections. And then finally, Andrew Breitbart's going to be establishing groundwater monitoring on the BLM lands. We haven't done that quite yet, but our initial results are quite positive. They're a little confounded by the fact that we've had this wonderful monsoon this late summer, but here is a Media Luna, and it's one of the rock structures that we're using to spread water, designed by Bill Zedike. And as you can see, last year we built it. We put it across this wet meadow that had a very small channel of sedges, and now you can see this summer there's a lot of new grass growth, a lot of sedge growth, and the water is definitely spreading across this wet meadow. So we're seeing big changes, and we're still trying to interpret the results. And Renee's work will help us do that, but I thought I'd show you some of our earlier results. What's exciting about the project is that it's benefiting not only the sage-grouse, but a number of other species, and also the ranchers are interested in the project because it's helping them increase the forage for their livestock, and that's been an unexpected benefit, actually. There's so many lessons learned. It's hard to boil it down to just a few. But I think as we talked about earlier, how climate change knows no boundaries, I think what's great about the group is that everybody realizes that while they have their own, we each have our own mission and our own objectives and regulations, that we need to be working together at the watershed level, working to expand our work from the private lands to the adjacent public lands so that we can begin to prepare for change across these boundaries. And I think that one of the things that struck me is that having this on-the-ground project has gotten our partners out, volunteers out from the local university, as well as the high school, local community members. It's gotten people out, and there's a lot of dialogue talking about, well, why are we doing this? What is this all about? And I think it's beginning to build support for what climate adaptation means, even if it's just one rock at a time. And I think we're starting to realize, well, gosh, maybe, we need to start small, but maybe it needs to be expanded to. So anyway, I think an important lesson learned from the project is finding local champions. In the lower slide there, this gentleman is a landowner from West Flat Top, and with the navy blue shirt on, and he's leading a field trip of a water conference of a number of people, explaining what these small rock structures are intended to do on his land. And, he is a local champion. And whether or not he believes in climate change or not, he's helping us with spread the word on this project and the advantages of this tool that we're using. There are a number of other lessons learned. I think that we're realizing that, this nature-based solution of these small rock structures are benefiting not only the grouse and the neotropical birds and the livestock by increasing their forage, but also the people's livelihoods that depend on these areas. I particularly want to thank all of the Southern Rockies for the initial funding on this project. It's helped leverage funding from all of these other groups, and most recently from the Upper Gunnison River, which has just been phenomenal to get their support. And so many of our Climate Working Group members have provided in-kind support. The Forest Service has gone off and cut the wood from their land to help build the log and fabric structures. Andrew Rebart, a hydrologist with the BLM, has taken so much of his time to do the planning and oversee the field crew and the staging and the building of the rock, and Gay Austin helping with monitoring. So it just goes on and on. Where we're headed now with the Gunnison Climate Working Group is, well, we obviously need to complete what we've started on this on-the-ground climate adaptation project. We need to continue monitoring, and we need to find some funding to continue that monitoring so that we can document the response. And the group discussed at our December meeting the need to formalize ourselves through an MOU or some other tool, so we hope to work on that this winter. And then really a big piece of what we have left to do is to develop basin-wide strategies for other priority systems and species. And that was the one part of our funding grant with the Southern Rockies that we didn't get to in a comprehensive way. And Kevin was kind enough to say, okay, you've bitten off a lot here. Let's see, hopefully you can figure out how to do that. So we joined forces with USGS and University of Montana and MSI in the San Juans and the Heritage Program, Forest Service, and Bill Travis at University of Colorado, and put together a proposal to the North Central Climate Science Center, the DOI Center, to do this very thing, to help us figure out how to build social and ecological resilience for priority systems in the San Juan Basin as well as the Gunnison Basin. We expanded the study area considerably by joining forces with our San Juan partners. I think we'll gain a lot in terms of hybridizing lessons learned and working with agencies and stakeholders. And so I'm really excited about this project and having the opportunity to expand our horizons, working with social scientists and conservation scientists across a broader region, and of course with the Gunnison Climate Working Group. We've been approved for funding, so we don't actually have funding in hand yet, but we're going to be meeting next week to start talking about conceptual framework. But our overall goal is to facilitate adaptation that contributes to this social ecological resilience, to species and ecosystem conservation, and sustainable human communities. And one of our highest priorities is to work with Department of Interior and other decision makers to develop practical strategies and actions to reduce the adverse effects of climate change on not only our key ecosystems, but the people and the livelihoods. And so we're in the early stages of working with this large group of PIs, and I'm very excited about it. One piece of that is that we included in the proposal is to expand, try to figure out, determine what it would take to scale up that on-the-ground restoration project focused on building resilience of the wet meadow habitat for the Gunnison sagegrouse. And that will involve working with the climate scientists, working with the conservationists, and of course the wildlife biologists and social scientists to figure that out. So more to come on that over the next couple of years. But I wanted to thank everybody who has pitched in to create and to keep the Gunnison Climate Working Group going, and who've just been phenomenal to work with. And it's Jim Cochran with the Gunnison County. He's our local lead, but I won't read all of our partners, but I wanted to put in a big thank you to them. And special thanks to our landowners for taking a risk to work with us, trusting us, letting all of these various people on their land to work, and not only to design the project, to implement it, but to take field trips on the land to show the results, and it's just been a great group of people to work with. So thanks so much for this opportunity today to share with you the results or the latest status of where the Gunnison Climate Working Group is in this exciting climate adaptation project. So with that, I'll take any questions if you have them, but please note that it's not just me who's the key contact on this. Nate Seward is our Colorado Parks and Wildlife lead, and Jim Cochran with the Gunnison County. And there are many others, but if you're interested, there's more information. And we have information online, the vulnerability assessment, as well as some of our other well, the brochure about the Gunnison Climate Working Group and various fact sheets are on the conservationgateway.org. You could Google that. So thanks so much again for the opportunity, and I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
At this time, if you'd like to ask a question, please unmute your phone, press *1, and state your name when prompted. Again, for questions or comments, please unmute your phone, press *1, and state your name when prompted. And one moment, please, for questions to queue. We are getting questions queuing up. One moment, please. Our first question, Dagmar, your line is open.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity. Nice presentation. Looks like a great project. I work on the Bureau of Reclamation's Westside Climate Risk Assessment Program, and we do projections of the hydrologic impacts of climate change, and I'm interested in what you use to determine what the hydrologic effects are likely to be in your system. Did you use Reclamation's tools online, or did you have some other resource that you used?
Oh, good. Well, actually, Joe Barsugli at Western Water was working closely with Linda Mearns at NCAR and UCAR to develop the climate scenarios and the hydrologic scenarios associated with that for our 2009 Climate Adaptation Workshop for Natural Resource Managers. And I believe Joe used a lot of work by Brecky of the Bureau of Rec, and I don't have all the details, but and more recently, Imtiaz Ramwala, who is a research associate, a climate scientist funded by NOAA, working with us and with Western Water, and Joe, is going to be helping us update our climate scenarios to make them more user-friendly and for the locals. But I don't really have the details, but I could get that to you. Joe and Linda wrote a white paper outlining the methods and the sources. But so they were our key source of climate projections for hydrology, as well as temperature changes and snowmelt changes.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in reading that white paper if you could send it to me.
Yes. Yeah, if you want to provide me your, or send me my email's right there, I'd be happy to send it to you.
The B. Neely?
Yes. Yes.
At GNC. Great. I'll send you a request. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Presentation.
Our next question from Gary. Your line is open. Gary, go ahead. Your line is open.
Thank you, Betsy. Hi, this is Gary Graham with Western Resource Advocates. I missed the first part, so you may have covered this, but I've been concerned that the entire Gunnison Basin is basically desiccating from warming temperatures. Did you look at the entire system and what's the health of the ecosystem with respect to water retention? The work that you're doing in the riparian stuff is excellent, and I'm excited and the work with the local people. But the entire Gunnison Basin, did you take a look at that and figure out where the vulnerabilities are?
Well, yes, we did a vulnerability hi, Gary, by the way. We did a vulnerability assessment in 2011, and we mapped the freshwater as well as the terrestrial ecosystems. And then we evaluated each of the ecosystems in terms of their vulnerability to climate change using a number of factors. And what we used the method, and I'm happy to send you, or you could check on the Conservation Gateway for the Gunnison Basin Vulnerability Assessment. But the way we defined vulnerability was the proportion of the ecosystem at risk of being eliminated or reduced by mid-century as a result of climate change. And in some cases we had, especially for the forests with the help of Jim Worrall, we had spatial projected changes in spatial distribution of forest types. But we mostly were, basing our ranking on the literature search and interviews with experts. So it was a real expert-driven exercise. And as I said before, it's a work in progress, and as we get more information, we will hopefully be modifying it in the future, updating it.
Thank you. Did your private landowner stakeholders accept the climate projections that the scientists provided?
Well, when we started working with our private landowners, we did not go into the details of the vulnerability assessment. We worked more just in generalities of, and of course last year was a drought year, so it was probably easier for people to sign up knowing that, but I think generally our one rancher has produced hay for many years, and he only got half of his hay crop last year. And they're dealing with this every year, and they experienced the 2002 drought or 2003, and then they're dealing with trying to make a living in a drought environment. So I think they had the incentive of wanting to increase forage for their livestock and hold water. As one of the ranchers puts it, he sees this project as helping hold water up in the upper watershed. When you increase the sediment and the vegetation, it serves kind of like a sponge to hold water, in his words. But yeah, we just didn't get into all the details of the climate science. It's certainly available there for them, but I think we just didn't want to go there. But and one of our landowners says, whether or not you believe in the climate science or not, this is more or less a no-regret strategy, that it will work under a variety of conditions. Now, I don't know if that helped answer your question, Gary, or not. But
oh, it did. Thank you, and I'll follow up with you on an email. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah, let's talk.
And at this time, I'm showing no further questions from the phone lines.
Great. We like that. Let's go to lunch.
Okay, thank you again for the presentation for the Southern Rockies, and we look forward to having you folks that are on the line join us for the next presentation.
Thank you.
This concludes today's conference. You may disconnect at this time. Thank you for joining.